Welcome to the Primal Endurance podcast, where we shake up the status quo of ineffective conventional endurance training. Enjoy an assortment of expert guests, where we cut to the chase and give you the unfiltered scoop on what it takes to go long, have fun, and stay healthy. And now, here's your host, Brad Kearns.
Let's get into some really thoughtful, again, lengthy questions, which is fine. Try to be as concise as possible, but I do like the color in the background, so I'm going to give you that. So Peter Coffey is next. He says, in the heat, I've had a hard time controlling my heart rate. I'm 33, so the beeper's at 147, but sometimes I get up to 150, 155. I can still nose breathe and remain calm and in control. Aha! Thank you for pointing that out, man. This is where we get into trickery and funny business. I love Tanya Prazak on Endurance Planet, always pointing out that endurance athletes are trying to constantly sneak those beeper numbers up and give themselves an allowance to take a few more beats and, I guess, enjoy their workout more. The point of training aerobically and adhering to the maximum aerobic heart rate is to be conservative and ensure your progress at becoming fat adapted and more efficient aerobically, which is the key to success in endurance sports. So when you allow your heart rate to creep up and over that 180 minus your age magic number, and yes, there's some adjustment factors where certain individuals who've been very successful and very experienced can add 5 beats to that number. Many other individuals have to subtract 5 beats, such as if you had illness, injuries, setbacks in recent times. And some people have to subtract 10 from that maximum aerobic heart rate if they've had a recent major surgery or are taking any kind of prescription medication. So the 180 minus your age is key. You can look in Primal Endurance in the sidebar where I talk about my misfortune of miscalculating my maximum aerobic heart rate and training at or below 142 for months and months and feeling fine and still being able to nose breathe and remain calm and in control when my maximum aerobic heart rate was really 130. So I was going 12 beats higher routinely. And of course, once in a while on the hills, the thing would get up to 145 and I couldn't slow it down right away. So there I am, 15 beats above my maximum aerobic heart rate. And all it did was cause all kinds of trouble. I landed myself in the hospital with an emergency appendectomy and severe dehydration. And I blame that partially on the months preceding it of doing slightly too stressful, not extremely, because I'm an old guy. I wasn't having any competitive goals around the racing circuit, but I was going out there and jogging every day, thinking I was doing myself a favor, thinking it was low stress and totally aerobic. And it was actually into that chronic pattern where there was a little bit of stimulation of stress hormones and a little bit more glucose burned, higher percentage of glucose burned than fat, and it was hindering my progress to the extent that I finally became burnt out and really tired and then suffering from random medical problem, which I really don't think is random. Okay, so another pitch for being strict and devoted and not allowing that maximum aerobic heart rate to drift up, even if you can still nose breathe and even if you feel comfortable and in control. And I know we have in the book those subjective tests about being able to breathe through your nose or being able to converse comfortably, but you can cheat those, okay? So you can get really good at breathing through your nose where you can take these deep, giant breaths while you're sprinting along at way higher than maximum aerobic heart rate. So really the only way to really do this is to get that wireless heart rate strap on and look at your watch, set the beeper, and honor it. And now you can go on eBay and get a Polar F1 heart rate monitor for like $28. So no excuses that you don't have the budget to get one of those fancy $300 ones. Just get a basic heart rate monitor that beeps when you set the alarm. Okay, back to Peter's question. So I can get up to 150, 155 and still remain calm and control. Should I review the plus minus section of those adjustments that I just talked about? I have a solid fitness base. I trained and ran 2 half marathons. It's just frustrating to run so slow and still pass my maximum heart rate. Is it maybe the heat? And that's a great question, because the beauty of monitoring your heart rate and training according to heart rate is that it takes into account all variables. Your heart is working as hard as it needs to perform on that day for what you're asking of it, right? So if you're tired and overtrained or overstressed or didn't get adequate sleep the night before, you are going to go slower at the same heart rate. It's going to be reflected in your ability to produce work at whatever pace or whatever measurement you're going. If you're 17 miles an hour on the bike, or you're going 9-minute miles on the run, and then on a tired day, you're going 10-minute miles, that's that. That's where you are on that day. In the heat, of course, when you take your first step down the road on a hot, humid day, as we are experiencing all summer here throughout America, and especially in California, has had some good heat waves with over 100 degrees throughout a lot of the state, you're going to go much slower at the same heart rate. So you do not change the heart rate. What you change is the pace. Automatically, the pace is going to change for you, right? So you honor your heart rate limits and see what you get out of your body each day. You're still getting a nice aerobic training effect, even if you're going super, super slow. I go up to Mammoth Lakes, California, elevation 8,000 feet, and I'm going on my runs at 130 heart rate, and they're a lot slower than they are at 1,300 feet here in Auburn, and that's great. I'm still getting a training effect. I'm training at altitude. I'm doing a solid for my body. I'm just going really, really slow, and it's turning into a jog walk instead of a run, just because of the altitude. That's fine. Same with the heat. Adjust for the heat. So Peter continues with, before formal marathon training, I started at 10 reps and did squats, deadlifts, and leg press. Now that I'm working into my marathon plan, I cut the reps back to 5, and I'm taking 20 to 40 seconds rest. The reason I cut back is these workouts left me sore for days. I know you said recently in a podcast that you cannot let the maximum sustained power workouts or other even primal essential movements affect other parts of our training adversely. Any advice on how to mitigate this muscle soreness? Should I do more foam rolling? Should I do a light jog after my maximum sustained power workouts to clear out the old blood and the acid? Okay. And I just talked about this recently with Phil Maffetone for my own training schedule and where this high intensity strength training should fit in so that I can recover and feel healthy and energetic. And he said, you really don't want to induce next day muscle soreness after your strength training sessions. So back off of them if you're getting sore, especially if you're an endurance athlete with goals that are running 13.1 mile. The maximum sustained power workouts will benefit you, as we discussed at length and talked about Sami Inkinen, but you don't want to put out too much energy. The return on investment for an extremely high energy output strength training session where you're getting sore and feeling fatigued the following day is just not there for a half marathon running athlete. If you're training for the CrossFit Games and you need to overload yourself and you're going to get real sore after some of those sessions, and that's part of your training, and you're going to rest a lot afterward, that's one thing. But you really do not want to induce a lot of muscle soreness following these sessions. So yeah, fewer reps, lower weight, even if you have to depart from the calculations where you're going for 80% of 1 rep max or whatever you're doing for maximum sustained power, or you're doing your 6 rep max and you're using that weight, just take the weight down a little. It's still a fantastic workout to go down and do a deep squat with weight on your back and see how you feel the next day. And you'll progress quicker because the stress load of your training will be reduced, less risk of overtraining, fatigue, burnout, illness, injury, and you'll still be getting strong by doing these workouts. I have to tell myself this too, because when I get into the gym, maybe it's not my favorite thing to go hoist weight around. I don't know. I like playing speed golf better or high jumping. But when I get in there, I psych myself up. I get pumped up. I'm like, all right, let's go. We're here for business. I got my headphones on. I'm not the most social guy in the gym. I'm going right over to the plates to get it over with. And sometimes I have a tendency to overdo it because I get excitable and I want to get the workout over with quickly. So I'm doing things that are really strenuous and really high intensity. So I'm trying to integrate more gentle strength training sessions where they're still tough. I'm still working it. I'm doing the water legs in the pool. You can search YouTube for Brad Kearns water legs. It's a great ab workout. It's very difficult. It's over with in 20 or 30 seconds. And it doesn't kill you because you're in the water and you're not getting that muscular load or the high heat forming like you would in a gym. Okay, so take it easy on the weight workouts, Peter. And here comes a super long question from this reader, but it's fun stuff, so let's check it out. I've ditched the nasty craft beer habit. Sorry about that, all you craft beer fans, and readopted a PB lifestyle. How about the excess craft beer habit? If you like your craft beer and want to go to John Staley's place in San Diego on Tuesday nights only, have fun. But 5 nights a week, maybe that's what he means by nasty. I don't know. I read Primal Endurance, fell in love with the concepts. I'm attacking a slow and steady 180 minus age training plan. My goal is to use the rest of the year to build a base, then take some rest, build a base and into next year. I want to compete in a few marathons. I'm down 24 pounds since May 1st. Congratulations, man. I feel amazing and my sleep is getting better. My workouts are based on duration and I plug along at a heart rate of 141. I'm 34 years old, but I dropped it down from 146 to 141 on account of coming from a sedentary state of fatness. All right, man, way to use the calculations right. You subtract 5 beats if you haven't been kicking butt for a while. 141 sounds great. Every 2 weeks, I do a math test. I go 2 miles on the track. My initial baseline was 16:30 pace. I think that means per mile. And his most recent one was 14:30. So here's another example. Down 25 pounds since May, and this thing came to me in July. So that's phenomenal. And then 2 minutes per mile improvement on the math test around the track. So when you have that much improvement to achieve at first, all the effort should go into those aerobic workouts to just lower that thing down to 14:30, maybe down to 12:30. And then you can consider once in a while throwing in some periods of time where you're doing sprinting, high intensity strength training. But that's just such fantastic aerobic progress. You just want to keep that up. Keep the stress low, especially because you're losing weight, which is a stress on the body, and you're jumping into this from a sedentary period. You don't want to have any setbacks. My runner friends laugh at my pace and strategy, but I'm encouraged and eager to prove this method works. I almost get satisfaction watching them wreck their weekends because they insist on running at a higher heart rate for as long as possible every Saturday morning. They spend the rest of the day sore and recovering, while I spend my weekend full of energy and feeling motivated to participate in life. Here's my question. Is building an aerobic base for the rest of the year too long? I'm not planning to do any intensity till next year. Finally, where can I find speed golf events? So I kind of answered his question before I saw it. It's like, keep going, man. Keep improving that time. And if that time's dropping and dropping and dropping, don't change what's working. If you get to a sort of a plateau where you started at 16:30 per mile, you dropped it to 14:30, you dropped it to 13:30, you dropped it to 12:30, and then it's hanging around there on successive tests, you can go and experiment with throwing in some wind sprints and starting to adapt your body to the occasional sprint workout and high intensity strength training sessions too. For now, I think you're doing great. The big speed golf event is the World Speed Golf Championships at the Glen Club in Chicago, Illinois in late October. I believe it's October 17th, 18th. Look up speedgolfinternational.com, and I hope to see you there. There's spots for any amateur that wants to get into the sport and try it out. Such a wonderful, exciting thing. And you can learn more about speed golf. Just look for Speed Golf Introduction on YouTube, and I tell you all about it in a short duration video that you will love. It's running around the golf course, getting an aerobic workout, carrying just a few clubs instead of a whole bag, and playing the entire course in around an hour rather than taking all day out there. It's a wonderful aerobic experience, and it also puts you in this Zen frame of mind where you're hitting great shots because you're not in that over-analytical mindset that hinders your golf performance so much, especially people who are not as good as the guys we're watching on TV. You just run up to the ball and hit it, and you let your natural athletic ability and instinct take over. And it's such a wonderful experience to get into that zone and just flow through the course and play the sport in a way so much differently than the over-deliberate game that we're so accustomed to. So there's the speed golf plug for today's podcast. And let's do another one with Luis before we wrap up. I'm an adventure racer. I'm training for a 72-hour nonstop race in September. It includes trail running, mountain biking, kayaking, and navigating through rough terrains. Sounds like fun. Do you have an extra spot on your team? Just kidding. 72 hours nonstop. Anything that interferes with my bedtime, that's my long-standing athletic rule. Any competitive event or endeavor that interferes with my bedtime is off limits. And I almost broke that rule one time when I did a mountain bike attempt from Auburn to Lake Tahoe. I succeeded 3 times. It's right over the Sierras. It's 84 miles, 13,000 feet of climbing. Takes about 13 hours. But on my first attempt, I was in the middle of the wilderness. I was checking my pace and how much time I had left, and I got scared that I was going to get stuck in the dark. So I turned around and rode all the way back to town. So that makes it a much longer ride than 80-something miles. It was 120 or whatever. Hitchhiked part of the way, rode part of the way, hitchhiked part of the way, and got home at 11:30 at night. So if it was after midnight, it would have broken my rule. But that was a long day, leaving at 5 in the morning and making it back to Auburn and just making that attempt and then building up the desire and motivation to actually come back and conquer the Sierras on bicycle in one day. Fun stuff. I had an event called the World's Toughest Mountain Bike Ride that went on for 2 years. So there's about 60 other people in the world that can claim their finisher award for having ridden from Auburn to Lake Tahoe on mountain bike through the Jeep trails and back roads and hiking trails, including Big George actually did it. Okay, here's a couple questions for you about my 72-hour race. I started doing base and changing my diet 2 weeks ago. I can already feel the effects of fat loss in my body. I came from doing the high intensity interval approach for months, trying to hack my way, but have felt depleted for a while, always wondering if my aerobic base was good enough. How can you figure out if you have a good aerobic base is the first question from Louise. That's the maximum aerobic function test. This is a simple, low intensity test you can do frequently because it's not strenuous, because you're running at your aerobic heart rate or performing whatever your favorite activity is, and you want to repeat the same course, the same conditions, and the same heart rate. Simplest example is 8 laps running around a track. So you go to the same track, it's the same distance, you go 8 laps, you keep your heart rate as close as possible through the duration of the 8 laps at your maximum aerobic number, at that 180 minus age magic number. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to try to get my heart rate up to 130. That can happen really fast, and then try to hold it there. So if it gets to 132, I notice I back off a little bit, gets back down to 128, 129, I'm there. Oops, it's up to 132 again. So it's going in between 128 and 132. I'm doing the best I can to keep it consistent and have it average at 130. And then after the 8 laps are up, you measure your time. You track your time, and over the course of many months of devoted aerobic training, you are going to have a faster time at the same heart rate on the same course. That's how you know the aerobic training is working. And believe me, this is really important. I was trying to buy into this and trust this when I was a professional racer and slowing down all my workouts and feeling, so insecure and so nervous. Like, am I going to be able to compete on the race course? I'm going so slow at all my workouts. And oh my gosh, having the confirmation that you're getting more aerobically efficient by improving your time at those MAF tests. And again, this is so much better than a time trial because you can always dig deep and go harder and ask more work output for your body during a time trial and get an improved time. You know your previous time was 10 minutes and now you're going to do 9:45, gosh darn it, no matter what, by just digging deep. And that's a less authentic representation of your fitness progress than going slow and comfortable at that aerobic heart rate and just noticing what time you turn in. It's like you're a robot. You can't go faster on your time because you're constrained by heart rate. That's what's coming. That's how you can tell what's coming out of your body and what the real fitness progress is. And as I said, the heat, the altitude, fatigue, having a drink of caffeine, all these things that cause you to elevate heart rate or perform slower, such as in the heat or the altitude, are going to influence your MAF test result. So you want to go same course, same time of day, whatever, only when you're feeling strong and rested, because you don't want to have a lousy MAF test. That's not an accurate representation if you could come back the next day and do much better because you got better sleep or because you're not sore. So you do it on days when you feel good and you feel ready to deliver a good effort. But again, it's an easy test to perform because you're performing aerobically. So that's how you know you have a good aerobic base. I can't really quantify it. I mean, I've heard people pop off and say, well, 1430 per mile is pretty lousy, so you should try to get that down. And who's to say? I mean, whatever fitness level you're at, that's where you're at. And congratulations for making the effort. So I don't care if it's 1630, like the previous question. That's where you are that day. you just want to work to improve it. Like the guy got down to 1430. So it's a wonderful story. It's all relative and it's all individual and personal. That's why training according to heart rate is so important, as opposed to training in a group dynamic where you're running the pace of other people who might be fitter than you and getting a different workout effect and actually compromising your fitness goals because you're trying to hang with people that are fitter than you. Second question. At the end of the book, you guys have great suggestions for training plans, but they don't include strength work. When do you suggest I start incorporating MSP sessions? After 8 weeks of aerobic training? Can they be included during? So again, like I answered on I believe the first question, get that distinct and focused period of aerobic base built without worrying about high intensity strength training or sprinting sessions. At least 8 weeks at the start of the year, and it might even be a whole year or 2 years, like in the Mike Pigg story. Okay? If you're feeling good, if you're making progress, if you've had some improvement in your aerobic function through your MAF tests, then of course you can throw in strength. And it's a good idea to follow the periodization plan where you're saying, okay, for the next 3 weeks, it's going to be an intensity phase. So I will throw in a couple strength training sessions a week, a sprint workout. I'll do some high intensity play sessions if I'm doing other stuff outside of the structured workouts, and just allow that to be a period of time where volume is dramatically lowered. So you're not so much worried about hitting all those aerobic workouts and putting in the hours and the miles, but you're more doing intense and rest, intense strength session, intense sprint session, more rest, more downtime, more walking, more slower paced aerobic where you're not even near your maximum aerobic heart rate. You're down well below it, 20, 30 beats below. And we don't talk about that enough. We're always talking about the limit, like don't exceed the limit. Don't go over 130 or 141 or whatever it is, but you get a wonderful training effect even if you're well below that aerobic limit. So when I was a professional racer back in my 20s, my magic number was 155. That was my aerobic maximum heart rate. And I could run 6-minute miles at that pace, which is a pretty ambitious running speed. And I didn't want to do that every day because it gets kind of strenuous. So many of my runs were in the range of 115, 120 to 130 heart rate. That's 40 beats below my maximum aerobic heart rate. Same with cycling. Many of my rides were in the 100 to 115 heart rate, where I'm just spinning on flat ground and getting an aerobic training effect, teaching my body to become better at burning fat, having minimal stress impact of the workout, so I could pedal for a few hours and not have it interfere with, let's say, an intense session that I was doing, or even a race I was doing the next day. We would commonly pedal for a couple hours the day before an all-out race, because the pace was so slow that I was just getting out there and keeping loose and exercising and looking at the course. So when you get fit and you can go 30 beats below your maximum aerobic heart rate, maybe for most people that's just a walk. At the time when I was competing and an elite professional, it was a decent running pace of 8 or 9 minutes per mile. Today, if I was 30 beats below my maximum aerobic heart rate, that's me getting up and walking to the mailbox. Okay, it's just a casual walk to get me up to 100 beats a minute, but you're still getting an aerobic training effect. Maffetone talked about this, where the aerobic energy producing enzymes are recruited at all intensity levels. So to get up off the couch and walk around and go get the mail or take the dog for a walk at night is an actual aerobic training session that will contribute to your success and peak performance in a competitive setting, because you're still recruiting all those low-end aerobic energy producing enzymes and muscle fibers that go when you need to beat at 100 heartbeats a minute. Those are still working when you're beating at 175. You're also recruiting a whole bunch of other stuff, including some anaerobic muscle fibers and energy producing enzymes when you're going 175, but you're still using the low end stuff. So if all you do is a structured aerobic workout at 155 and you go for an hour and then you go sit at your desk all day long, and this is why we had that whole chapter about complementary movement and lifestyle practices for endurance athletes. If you just do that 1 hour a day, you're going to be an aerobically deficient endurance athlete if you're trying to compete and go for an Ironman distance race or a half Ironman or a marathon, because you don't move around enough and you don't activate the aerobic system enough in daily life. That's why a 5 to 10 minute walk is a fantastic training session for a serious endurance athlete. Do not discount the importance of biking on your cruiser bike down to the market for 8 minutes, getting some groceries and coming back. That all fits into the big picture of those big time training sessions where you're climbing the mountains and going for 100 miles. So that's the second question of Luis. And third, for these type of long endurance events, what do you suggest nutrition look like? I read in the book that we can up the healthy carbs, but is this during or after exercise? If you could share what a typical menu looks like for endurance athlete on training and non-training days, it would be awesome. Okay, well, first let's talk about that 72-hour event. That's a little strange because most people are just trying to get to the finish line. So even a Western States 100-mile runner, I'm here in Auburn amongst all the people, this is the finish line for the Western States, they're throwing down all kinds of garbage on the trail. They're having Jell-O trucked in from grandma's house and cherry pie from Maquetta's Market in Auburn and In-N-Out burgers being called for, and the runners are stuffing all this stuff in their face. I personally think that compromises their performance a little bit, but most of those people are going at a very comfortable fat-burning aerobic heart rate. They're not going to have the digestive distress that a triathlete might, wolfing down an In-N-Out burger, but they're eating whatever it takes to get them to a 24-hour finish line. If you're going nonstop for 72 hours, you're going to actually have to look at the nutritional quality of what you're consuming. Otherwise, you're going to bomb out after 48 or 60 hours. Same with the Race Across America riders. Johnny G had a couple of teeth dissolve in his mouth in Ohio because he was sipping on a high sugar drink for 7 consecutive days, and the sugar was on his teeth nonstop. I don't think he took time to brush his teeth while he was riding his bicycle for 22 hours a day in the Race Across America. His nutritional shortcomings caused him to drop out of the 87 Ram, and he came back at 89. You can read about this in Primal Endurance because he was probably the first guy to try fat-adapted training. I also interview him at length for the Primal Endurance online course, which is coming soon. We're going to be touting that big time. It's going to be a comprehensive multimedia educational experience to bring the book to life and all the content in the book with a variety of different videos and educational opportunities to come all in on the Primal Endurance concepts. But anyway, in 89, Johnny started experimenting with high-fat fueling for a 10-day nonstop bicycle race across America. So he was having avocado and MCT oil mushed up into a Ziploc bag and biting the corner of the bag and sucking that down and not spiking his blood sugar constantly. So for the 72-hour event, boy, I'm looking at, obviously they have to be portable, but I'm looking at portable, nutritious foods like avocados, trail mix, dried fruit, fresh fruit, whatever you can come up with that's not processed and has some fat content to it. Hard-boiled eggs. I mean, you can eat 10 eggs in a day's time if you're traversing the mountainous course. But if you're talking about eating 10 gels or 20 gels, all of a sudden you're going to get into some real concerns about digestive distress when you're pounding that much sugar and that much synthetic food into your body while asking it to perform at a high level and asking your brain to perform when you're talking about navigating and throwing all those other challenges in there. So I'm talking about portable, nutritious, whole food sources. Artisana makes little packets of all their nut butters. If you can't find them at a Whole Foods or a quality market near you, you can look for them online. I see Justin's almond butter in packets all over the place. If you're going all day, you might as well take an entire jar of almond butter or cashew butter in your backpack and chow down on that. So I would advocate going low sugar for those extreme endurance events. And you asked about in daily life also, and we have the primal style eating pattern, which is working so well for endurance athletes. But when you're around those high glycolytic workouts, those high sugar burning workouts on those days, perhaps before and after those workouts, you can up the nutritious carb intake a little bit to make sure that you're fully fueled and recover, fully fueled for and recover from those challenging workouts. So stuff like sweet potatoes, quinoa, wild rice, a little more fruit that day, vegetables, of course, nuts and seeds, dark chocolate. Those things will get your glycogen reloaded no problem, especially as you become more fat adapted. You have a reduced need for glycogen and a better ability to burn fat and even ketones if you're restricting carbs. And speaking of that, that would be a fun topic. We'll get some good podcast guests on here that talk in more detail. You can go listen to or watch the Zach Bitter episode that aired recently where he talked about his commitment to ketogenic endurance training for high-level performance at ultra-distance running. So this guy's running like 6:30 pace, okay, all day, like for 6 hours in the National 100K Championships, which he won. So he's performing he's burning a lot of calories, put it that way. He's getting up there into the glucose burning range, even for him. And his training is highly emphasizing periods of true ketogenic, where he's limiting the carb intake so much that he's becoming highly adapted to burning fat and ketones and not needing hardly any calories for long duration out there on the trail. He reported during the podcast that when he was pacing someone during the Western States 100-mile run from mile 60 into the finish line, this is mountainous, difficult terrain in the canyons, American River canyons, he went 40 miles and it was like 11 hours or something like that with no calories. He just had some aminos and water. I believe that. Go look at the video or listen to the show to make sure I'm not embellishing. But it was absolutely amazing. And I said, well, I guess that's one way to determine that you're fat adapted, if you can go 40 miles and all night without consuming any calories. So to get to that point takes some really firm commitment to dietary. You have to be in great shape as well. But the ability to transition into a ketogenic eating pattern, perhaps for a competitive advantage in a 72-hour race, is there, and it's within reach of everybody. Paul and Cynthia Grossenstein, they're guests at PrimalCon, and they were getting way into this many years back before anybody else. It was like the first I've heard of it. But Paul said he remembers having a steak dinner with some red wine the night before, and then going and doing a 13-hour Ironman with no added calories. He was fueled by steak and wine from the night before, and I think some liquid amino acids and water, and I don't know, maybe threw some coconut oil down or something, but definitely no carbs for an entire day. So phenomenal possibilities happening on that front. We'll get into that further, but for now, those are some super interesting questions. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Primal Endurance Podcast. This is your host, Brad Kearns. Till next time.
Are you someone who appreciates a fast, casual dining experience? Is it important that the taste of your food and the freshness of the ingredients take center stage? Well, bringing that experience to a table near you is the mission of the hottest new franchise concept in North America, Primal Kitchen Restaurants. If you want to learn more about this one-of-a-kind franchising opportunity, go to primalkitchenrestaurants.com. That's primalkitchenrestaurants.com.